All right, so today you should have out your 1-8 note sheet, and we're going to be looking at solving quadratic equations again. You've already done by factoring, we've done using the quadratic formula, and now we're going to be looking at completing the square. And then I'm also going to show you where the quadratic formula came from. We actually used the completing the square formula to figure out, to determine the quadratic formula to get that to begin with. And then we'll just do some basic review of factoring and the quadratic formula. So completing the square. If it's in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, um, and if a is not equal to 1, you want to divide every term by a. That's your first step. Your second step is to complete the square, and you add b divided by 2 squared to both sides of the equation. And then you want to write it as a perfect square, and then take the square root and solve for x. So those are kind of the basic steps. We might add another one in there. Perhaps we'll probably end up also subtracting c, or moving c to the by the 0 side on the right side there. We'll probably do that in step 2 there, maybe between 1 and 2, so maybe 1.5 there. So moving on here. So let's kind of like work through this. So solve each equation using completing the square. So basically there's nothing in front of the a there, so we're not going to do anything with the first step on there. Like I said, I'm going to add kind of a step and a half in here, so I'm going to move 13 over on the other side here. It just makes it easier so you don't get it confused. So then we're going to take b and divide by 2 and square it and add to both sides. Now your b value is your middle term up here, if you remember. So my b value here ends up being -8. That is my b value. So basically in here, I'm going to add b, which is -8, and I'm going to divide by 2 and square it and add to both sides. You're always going to do that. Whatever your b value is, you're going to divide by 2 and square it and add to both sides. So now let's just clean that up and figure out what -8 divided by 2 squared there is. -8 divided by 2 is -4, and if you square it, you actually get 16. So we're really adding 16 to both sides. So now that we got that left-hand side there, it looks like just a nice trinomial there. You want to factor it. So let's go ahead and factor it. What times what gives you x squared? X and x. What multiplies to give us 16 and adds to give us a -8 there? Oh yeah, a -4 and a -4, and it should always be the same number in there. If you got something like a 2 and a 4, that is, you didn't do something right up above. You probably didn't add b divided by 2 squared to both sides. So you need to go back and recheck your math on that. And then over here, clean this up. Now I'm going to write that left-hand side there as a perfect square there, so I'm going to write it as x minus 4. It occurs over there on the left-hand side there twice. It's x minus 4 times x minus 4. Well, we can write that as x minus 4 squared. So now we're going to undo that square root, that it's squared there, so we can undo the squared by taking the square root of both sides, and we do a plus or minus, so we get our two answers. And so when you undo a square there with a square root there, you end up getting x minus 4. Over here, we just get plus or minus 3, plus or minus square root of 3. And then I have to bring 4 on over, so I've got to add 4 to both sides. Those terms there on the right-hand side are not like terms, so I really just get 4 plus or minus the square root of 3. Can't combine those, they're not both underneath the square root, and they're not the same square root anyways. So looking at those, that says cleaned up as we can possibly get it. So it's kind of like an answer with the quadratic formula. You know how you get something like -b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a, and you clean it up. It usually gets down to be something like this, where you got 4 plus or minus the square root of something, and it might be even divided by yet. So the same thing with completing the square, you're going to get some answer that sort of looks like an answer with the quadratic formula as well. It's possible that you might just get two nice integers as well, but in this case, typically that's how your answer is going to look. Part B, again, First step I always do is first I look in front of, for my A value here in front of here, it's not anything, it's just 1, so I don't have to do step 1 on the other side there. If you remember what step 1 said, I'll just kind of refer back to it. If A is not equal to 1, we're supposed to divide every term by A. Well, our A is equal to 1, so we don't have to worry about step 1. So like I said, I'm putting step 1.5 in there. I always move my C value over on the other side. So I've got x squared plus 4x equals -1. And then next step there, you want to think about what your B value there is. And your B value in this case ends up being a 2 there, or 4 there. So we're supposed to take B divided by 2 and square it and add to both sides. So since my B there is 4, I'm going to take 4 divided by 2 and square it and add to both sides. So when I do that, I get x squared plus 4x plus 4 divided by 2 there is 2, and if I square it, I get 4. So the other side, I'm also going to get 4. So now I'm going to factor. My next step is to factor the left-hand side there. It's a nice trinomial there, so let's factor that out. X times x is x squared. But times what is 4 and adds to give me 4? That would be 2 and 2. And I know I factored it correctly because look what's inside. The parentheses are exactly the same. -1 plus 4 there gives us 3. So now I'm going to write the left-hand side there as a perfect square. So in other words, I've got 2x plus 2's there being multiplied. I'm going to write them together as x plus 2 squared equals 3. Next thing we're going to do there is we're going to go ahead and take the square root of both sides. We're going to solve for x here. So I'm going to take the square root, so I get a plus or minus on this side. If you take the square root of something squared, you just get what's underneath the square root, and x plus 2 there is underneath the square root, so I get x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 3. And then I can simply subtract 2 from both sides, so I get x equals either -2 plus or minus the square root of 3, or if you want to write it, you can go plus or minus the square root of 3 minus 2. Doesn't matter which way you write it. I just usually like to write it like the first option up here. I like that one just because then I don't get it mixed. I don't put the -2 underneath the square root. And I'll get that mixed up. So there's our solution right there. Whether you write it like the first one or second one, it's up to you. So again, solving by completing the square. Notice this time I've got an a value of something other than 1 there. So I've got to get rid of that a term there first. So I got to go ahead. Remember, it goes ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Well, according to our first step over here, if a is not equal to 1, divide every term here by a. So my a term there is 3, so I'm going to divide every single term in here by a. So when I divide 3x squared there by 3, I get x squared. 12x divided by 3 is a minus 4x. 6 divided by 3 there is 2. And 0 divided by 3 there is 0. So now that I've got the a completely out of there, I can go ahead now and just like before, I brought my c term over. So I get x squared minus 4x equals -2. And then we're back to doing exactly what we did on the other ones. We took our b value, divided by 2, and squared it and add to both sides here. So it's the b value that we have now. So our b value now is -4. I'm going to divide that by 2 and square it and add to both sides. So -4 divided by 2 there is -2, and squared I get 4. So I really get x squared minus 4x plus 4, and over here, -2 plus 4. So again, just like we've done the other 2 problems here, we're going to factor this left-hand side, clean up the right-hand side. So factoring the left-hand side there, what times what gives me x squared? Oh yeah, x and x. What multiplies to give me 4 and adds to give me -4? Oh yeah, -2 and negative 2. So now I can put that x minus 2 times x minus 2 together. So I can say x minus 2 squared equals 2. And I got to get rid of that squared. To get rid of squared there, I can take the square root. And the left-hand side there, I just get x minus 2. The right-hand side, I get plus or minus the square root of 2. And now I'm just going to simply bring 2 on over. So I get x equals 2 plus or minus the square root of 2. So there's my solution. And I'm going to do likewise there with letter D there. Again, you can't leave the 2 there in front of the x squared, so you divide everything in here by 2. This one here is going to get a little messy. You can start to see x squared minus 5 halves x plus 3 halves equals 0. Didn't turn out nicely like the one above there, but we still have an a there as a 1. We got to deal with some fractions here. We're still going to work through it exactly the same. So I'm going to bring my 3 halves over on the other side. I get x squared minus 5 halves x equals negative 3 halves. I'm supposed to now take b divided by 2 there and square it, or if you want to think about it, it can be b times 1/2. Same thing as dividing by 2, you can multiply by half. So my b here is negative 5 halves, so I can take negative 5 halves times 1/2 here and square it and add to both sides. Well, if I do that, negative 5 halves times 1/2 there gives me a negative 5 fourths. So I'm really taking a negative 5 fourths and squaring and adding to both sides. So let's clean that up. We get x squared minus 5 halves x plus square negative 5 there is 25, squaring 4 there is 16. So negative 3 halves plus 25 sixteenths. Now I'm going to go ahead and factor this. What multiplies to give me a positive and adds to give me a negative there, it has to be a minus and a minus. The trick when you have something like this as your fraction here, once if I go back over to here before I actually went ahead and squared this, that term there is actually what's going to go in here. So it's 5 fourths there. That minus 5 fourths actually goes in there because 5 fourths times 5 fourths there will give me positive 25 sixteenths. And a negative 5 fourths, if I were to add negative 5 fourths plus a negative 5 fourths, I get a negative 25, negative 10. Add your numerators, write down your common denominator, fourths, and then go ahead and reduce that down. 2 goes into negative 10 there, negative 5 times. 2 goes in there 4 times. So it does add to give me negative 5 halves. Multiplies negative 5 fourths times negative 5 fourths is 25 sixteenths. And negative 5 fourths plus a negative 5 fourths gives me a negative 5 halves. But the trick is that this value over here, once you've taken b times 1/2 there, before you squared it, that's actually what goes in there. So if we backed up or up here, and you can see the same pattern up here, we took our b divided by 2 here. So over here, the negative 4 halves there, if I clean that up, which I did, and that would become a negative 2, and then I would square it, right? So then what happened? That negative 2 appeared right over there. Notice. So again, before you square it, after you clean up inside there, that's actually what goes in there if you have a hard time with that. It's just kind of a little trick, but especially with the fractions, you might want to do that. All right, we're going to continue finishing this on the next lesson here.